Good evening, and welcome to Ghostly Trails. I'm Paul Barrand. You find me tonight scouring the United Kingdom for the most haunted hotspots and ghostly goings-on. Hello, I'm Paul Barrand, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey through haunted Oxfordshire in the east and the south of the area. We'll be visiting places such as Abingdon, Faringdon, Thame, Wallingford. So, tonight, let's start our journey in Wheatley.
The King and Queen pub in Wheatley, dating from the 15th century in the High Street, is rumoured to be haunted by a ghostly dog. Staff have reported chairs moving around during the night, and some customers have felt a strange aura while sitting in one part of the venue. Over at Holton Park stands an old manor house that was constructed in the early 1800s, though a house stood on the site as early as the 14th century.
Some say this original house was demolished because of its haunted associations, but this is only legend. The site is believed to be haunted by a young boy who was once heir to the estate before he was murdered by his envious guardian and governess. He could be seen running at full pelt down the main staircase in a distinctive blue outfit.
Another tragic ghost tells of a nanny who tripped on the stairs while carrying the family's baby. Whilst she survived, the baby did not, and it's not surprising that she was never able to forgive herself. She's been seen roaming the house from time to time. We now move to the town of Thame, at the very east of the county. We come across Pendal House at Priest End. This was a former monastery that housed the Bishop of Lincoln in the 12th century, and where Joan of Arc's fate was decided.
In 1533 it was visited by Henry VIII and his wife Anne Boleyn, before which it had enjoyed centuries of occupation by an order of prebendal monks. It was sold from the church ownership in the 19th century to a local wealthy man called Charles Stone, who restored it into a private residence.
This long and colourful history has naturally provided various legends. Supposedly, there is an underground tunnel that links the prebendal with Notley Abbey, which stands a couple of miles away to the north in Buckinghamshire. There doesn't seem to be any logical reason for the tunnel, but one theory suggests it was used to hide the abbey's wealth from the visiting Henry VIII. The location of the tunnel, if it was indeed real, is now lost to the mists of time. A woman who worked at Notley Abbey in the late 19th century claimed to remember where the entrance stood, but this could not be verified.
Another account comes from a local man who heard a story as a young boy, where the gardener at the prebendal apparently saw ghostly monks working inside the ruined chapel. Closer inspection revealed an entrance to an underground passage, but upon returning the next morning, the gardener found the entrance had disappeared completely. One of the more notable owners of the property was Robin Gibb from the Bee Gees, who occupied the house with his wife Duina until his death in 2012. In one interview they recounted how they heard the winding up of a clock at 1 a.m. every morning from the empty coronation room, as well as seeing a 17th century ghost walk through the walls. They referred to him as John the Gardener, and this apparition was also seen by other visitors, moving through the wall from the living room into the dining room. Robin and Duina also claimed a bowl in the prayer room would fill up with ice-cold water on its own accord. And newly installed utilities like washing machines and telephones would break down without explanation.
Not far away is St Mary's Church. are said to be haunted by another grey lady similar to Rycote. An account from a choir boy in the early 1900s tells us that stories around the Grey Lady were widespread. Allegedly, she first manifested herself to the vicar in the 1880s, while celebrating Holy Communion. As he approached the seemingly Elizabethan lady kneeling at the altar rail, she disappeared. The vicar's son also felt her brush past him on the narrow belfry stairs, the distinct ruffle of robes echoing all around.
Similar experiences were reported during the Second World War, when the Home Guard used the church as a lookout post, feeling her brush past on the stairs as they climbed to their shift on duty. The next famous ghost story is something both strange and unique. On the night of the 25th of October 1828, William Noble Eden was murdered as he travelled home from Aylesbury Market, having been unsuccessful in his attempts to sell a cartload of vegetables. He was found in a field by a man called King on the turnpike road between Aylesbury and Thame, injured, and exclaiming, "O Lord! O God!" The night was particularly dark, and King was unable to see how badly injured Eden was, so he simply left him to his fate. Eden was found dead on the road later that night. At first it was written off as a drunken accident. He had presumably fallen off his horse and been run over by his cart. But one person was adamant that foul play was at hand. None other than Eden's wife. Mrs. Eden claimed that miles away at their home in Thame she had a vision in which her husband called out to her. Her account is as follows.
"When I was ironing a shirt on the Saturday night, my husband was murdered. Something came over me. Something rushed over me, and I thought my husband came by me. I looked up and thought I heard the voice of my husband come from near my mahogany table as I turned from my ironing. I ran out and said, 'Oh dear God, my husband is murdered, his ribs are broken.'" She also claimed to see the face of the murderer, a local named Benjamin Tyler. Strangely enough, this account actually appeared as evidence in a court of law, but fortunately the prosecution had more than this alone to go on. A year or so later, a Thame man called Solomon Sewell was arrested for poaching. In an attempt to lighten his sentence, he offered up information about William Eden's murder, and ended up shopping the very man that Mrs. Eden had envisioned as the murderer, Benjamin Tyler.
Instead of lightening his sentence, he ended up being convicted as a murder accomplice. And both Sewell and Tyler were executed in 1830, outside Aylesbury County Hall. Their motive was that Eden had apparently stolen a sheep from them, and had taken to taunting them whenever he saw them. William Eden's ghost has been reported on both the Aylesbury Road and Ford Road, roughly where he was murdered. He is said to appear to travellers as a warning of danger ahead, but the exact spot he manifests is difficult to pinpoint. It's also thought he haunts the churchyard of St. Mary's. The ghost has strangely been described as having horns like a ram's head. But this could be an apparition confused with another local legend.
This legend describes a ghostly ram that has been seen many times by the river. It is said to follow people down the river for a short time before disappearing, but there is little more information about the origins of this sighting. Another shady supernatural encounter is that of a green man, who appears on the Thame to Postcombe Road by the Tollgate House. Drivers have reported having to swerve out of the road to miss him, and another was so spooked he came off his motorbike.
In the town centre, the Birdcage Inn is purportedly haunted, not surprisingly, as it's one of the oldest buildings in Thame. Staff of the inn described hearing the muttering of voices in the dark, as well as being woken up by a shadowy presence above their beds.
There have also been the sounds of footsteps, unexplained mist, and even objects flung around the room. We move now into Henley on Thames, stopping off at the Bull Inn. This pub dates back to 1564, making it one of the oldest pubs in the town. The bar is reportedly haunted by the inexplicable smell of tallow candles, and a guest sleeping upstairs once reported being woken up by a young woman leaning over his bed, wearing a cowl. Just a stone's throw away, the Kenton Theatre is said to be haunted by a poltergeist. Doors opening and closing, lights going on and off, and even the smashing of mirrors have all reportedly taken place here. Some residents believe this can be attributed to the murderer Mary Blandy, who we came across in Oxford earlier. We already told the story of how she killed her father, and with a supposed love potion in the 1700s, and subsequently haunts Oxford Castle, but she is infamous in Henley too.
In the late 60s, a play based on the murder was performed at the Kenton Theatre, and the cast reportedly saw her ghost watching from the auditorium during the rehearsals.
Her home, Blandy House, can be seen just around the corner, now as a dental surgery, but her ghost has been seen all over Henley, including across the river at the Little Angel Inn. She is thought to have fled here after murdering her father. We now arrive at the lovely town of Wallingford, where the 16th century George Hotel houses our next handful of hauntings.
During the Civil War, a royalist was fatally stabbed in a fight, leaving his betrothed lady somewhat grief-stricken.
She fled to room 3, known best as the teardrop room, where, after mixing her tears with soot from the fire, painted teardrops on the wall. In that same room, the symbols remain. This room is said to be haunted by the girl. Her phantom has been waking many a hotel guest with her sobs for many years, and some have left the room feeling depressed after encountering her. Another version of the story suggests that her betrothed was beaten to death by burglars. Another spectre spotted here is that of a man who was apparently murdered at the George Hotel in 1626.
But once again, there are differing stories. One account suggests he was murdered at the George Hotel, whilst another states he was hanged nearby by the authorities for an unknown crime.
2 ghostly children have also been spotted, but the story behind them is unclear. Moving further northwest to Dorchester on Thames, we find another hotel of the same name.
This was built in the late 15th century and is widely believed to be one of the oldest coaching inns in the country. The ghost of a woman dressed in white has been seen in the vicar's room, either crying or staring at the 4-poster bed in one of the bedrooms. There's not much to go on to explain this, but the inn was built on the site of an older hospice, which could be a connection.
Just over the road is the lovely Dorchester Abbey, which houses stories of snakes and saints, but we'll leave these stories for another time. Just north, on the road back towards Oxford, we turn off at the village of Marsh Balden, where we find a haunted bridge. Sometime in the 18th century, the Willoughby family, who owned the manor house at Marsh Balden, were out journeying in their carriage. As they crossed the bridge over the lake, the old structure gave way, and they fell into the freezing cold water below. None of them made it out, and they all tragically drowned, their bodies being recovered and eventually being buried at Balden House. Locals have witnessed a spectral carriage gliding across the grounds of Balden House, crossing the lake where the bridge used to stand, replaying the tragedy. We now zigzag southwards towards the thriving market town of Abingdon on Thames.
Late in the 19th century, Abingdon was troubled by a poltergeist in Western Helen Street. Lumps of coal, potatoes and detritus were launched through windows for several nights at a time, drawing large crowds who hoped to witness the strange events. The hurling of objects continued relentlessly until eventually the police were called. They suspected that a less supernatural explanation could be found in the form of a prankster. Subsequently, they searched the rooftops of houses in the vicinity but found nothing. The poltergeist activity continued for several more weeks, and it wasn't long before the police arrested a man named Alfred Carter on suspicion of being behind the vandalism. However, they were soon forced to release him, as not only did they lack evidence, the activity continued while he was in custody.
It is not known when the haunting came to an end, but some believe it is connected to a ghost that haunted the nearby Ox Street some years prior. Down by the river, the old jail on Bridge Street is said to be haunted. This old building was opened in 1812 as a prison, but closed in 1868 due to the construction of a larger prison in Reading. It was used in the decades following as a grain store, and in the 1970s was converted into a leisure centre until 2002. Now they stand as a complex of apartments, but don't let these modern uses fool you. During the construction of the leisure centre, members of staff reported strange noises when the building was empty.
Some witnessed baskets of clothes swinging in the changing room with seemingly no explanation. And one particularly sinister ghost is connected to the hauntings here. On the 23rd of February 1629, 8-year-old John Dean was hanged for arson in Abingdon, making him the youngest person to be hanged in British criminal history. He had apparently set fire to 2 houses in Windsor and was accused of malice, revenge and cunning when his sentence was passed. Subsequently, the sound of a child laughing from inside the building has been heard, as staff were locking up for the night.
Moving northwest, we arrive in Faringdon. The Bell Hotel here is said to be haunted, which is no surprise given the building's origins as a hospice for Cistercian monks in the 12th and 13th century. During the English Civil War in 1646, parliamentary forces began a ferocious assault on the town, which was held by royalists at the time.
Artillery from the top of Folly Hill bombarded the town, destroying the steeple of Faringdon Church, setting fire to many of the buildings in the village and damaging the Bell Hotel itself.
It is believed that a group of parliamentary soldiers mutinied shortly after the event, and Cromwell had them all executed in the town, and it is the ghosts of these soldiers that now haunt the inn. It's also considered that the ghosts could be that of monks that worked here in the 12th and 13th century whilst caring for Faringdon's sick.
Over at the churchyard in Faringdon, the ghost of a headless man has been spotted, cradling his severed head in his hands. This man is believed to be Naval Officer Halton Park, who, according to legend, was decapitated in battle during the War of the Spanish Succession. The circumstances are tragic. It seems that Halton was a disappointment to his parents, spending much time in taverns away from home. He was popular with the ladies, but held a particular affection for a barmaid at his favourite tavern in Faringdon. Much to the consternation of his overbearing mother, she sought to separate the pair by having him sent off to join the navy, which he did with much reluctance. It was somewhere off the Spanish coast that after a major naval engagement at Redondola, Halton was decapitated by a cannonball.
A memorial service held in Halton's honour was arranged, and as his mother was leaving, his spirit appeared before her, clutching his mangled head, Her screams of terror echoed far and wide across the town. His ghost was also thought to appear to the captain and gunner of the ship, until they were brought to justice. The restless spirit continued to haunt the graveyard for many years, until a courageous vicar in the early 19th century successfully exorcised the spirit using bell, book and candle. This seems to have worked, for the apparition has not been spotted since in living memory. We now travel northeast. Before I hand back over to Robin to present you the ghost stories of West Oxfordshire, I have one more tale to tell at Stanton Harcourt.
The Lady Pool Pond in the village is said to be the home of two restless spirits. Nearby, Stanton Harcourt Manor, dating back to the 15th century, is said to be where Dame Alice Harcourt was murdered, while the rest of her household was at prayer.
The body was flung from a window of the house, but there is little more detail on this sinister incident. Alice's restless spirit subsequently haunted the village until it was laid to rest in the Lady Pool Pond.
Another tale tells of a Mrs. Hall, who resided at the manor in the 18th century, and who committed suicide after discovering her husband was having an affair with the local landlady of the Harcourt Arms Inn. It is said that she too was laid to rest in the Lady Pool Pond. And, as with so many other legends we have seen already, it is believed that if the pool ever dries up, both Alice and Mrs. Hall will return to haunt the village.
We move west now to Bampton, where I'll put you back into the capable hands of Mr. Robin Shuckburgh.